And my kind of direction to get here and path through sociology was definitely not direct. So I didn't take my first sociology course till my junior year in college, where I was a math major. But then I ended up going to grad school for sociology and, loved it. And the work that I do now is kind of a cross-disciplinary collaborative research group. So I still get to use a lot of the sociology stuff that I learned in graduate school. I'll leave it at that for now. I think one question I had for maybe the organizers or the group is where you're at in terms of being undergrad students, grad students, where you are in your kind of path as I think about answers to your questions.
So maybe when we have a question, we'll ask them to answer that question for you, so you can best answer it. How's that? Okay, Beeta.
Hi, can you can hear me?
We can. You can introduce yourself to the group.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Beeta, and similar to Dr. Smith, I didn't have a really, it wasn't a direct path to sociology. It was a really great, intricate path. I started actually as a marketing major many years ago, and I had taken an elective in a sociology course, and I loved it. And then I kind of forgot about it and continued to do marketing for many years. And I had a really pivotal moment in my career after a few years of being in events marketing, where I think I realized that sociology was something that I had loved. I had kind of researched and done as a side interest for much of my adult life, and realized it was actually something I wanted to do in my day-to-day, and I wanted to apply my career to that. So right now I work at a oral care startup called Quip. We're actually based out of New York City and Brooklyn. I lead our talent acquisition team there and our DEI team there. And, I went through a lot of different avenues before I decided this was the path I wanted to go on. And it started off thinking it would be researching and then social work, and then ultimately realizing I wanted to take my my focus of sociology and apply it to the corporate world, and how we can build a more inclusive environment, hire really great talent. And I've been at the organization for almost 2 years now. So that's a little bit about me, and excited to meet all of you.
Thank you, Beeta.
Yeah.
Karmen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karmen. I went to Mason and graduated in May 2021. So I am a recent grad. Like Beeta, my path to sociology was not linear at all either. I started at Mason as a global affairs major, and my freshman research project was on police brutality and hip hop music. And everyone was like, "You're a global affairs major. That's a little strange." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. That is a little weird. How do I make a major out of this?" And my advisor told me about sociology. I'd never heard of it before, and fell in love with it, and graduated 4 years later with a degree in sociology. And I was lucky enough to get a job after graduation working at a research institution called Insight Policy Research, which is in Arlington. And we work with a bunch of government contractors to do program evaluation and technical assistance. I personally work on projects with the Department of Education, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the National Science Foundation. And I primarily do qualitative analysis work, survey programming and designing, and I support a lot of other projects while I'm there as a research assistant. So that's a little bit about me. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Karmen. Sydney Zhu. Sydney.
Hi, everyone. It's like really nice to see so many people at this event. I'm Sydney. I'm a fourth year sociology and political science student at GW. So I'm not with Mason, but we're like around the same area. And I'm still a student right now, so I feel like I definitely bring a little bit of a different perspective. So I'm definitely eager to learn some career advice from you guys as well, as I'm in like my last month of school. But during my time at GW, I've like really had a lot of privileges and opportunities to volunteer and like get involved with the DC community, which I think has been a really huge aspect of my experience in sociology. I think I got introduced to it by some really great professors that like really showed me the way and showed me just how great sociology is. So yeah, I've worked at a couple of housing nonprofits. Housing Up and 1DC, which are really grassroots-based, community-based, Black-led nonprofits in DC, primarily in Wards 7 and 8. But yeah, my academic interests also reside in like my identity as an Asian American. So I had the opportunity to work with one of my favorite professors at GW on my senior thesis last semester, which studied gentrification, displacement, and the impacts of tourism in the Gallery Place Chinatown neighborhood, which was really interesting. I think really like shaped my entire experience as a student. But yeah, currently my career interests are residing in nonprofit work, hopefully in the housing issues in the DMV area. And yeah, so that's basically me, and I'm excited to talk with you guys and also learn a lot too.
Okay, well, the floor is open for all of you to ask questions. I've got one quick here. There's a question for Sydney, looks like. Said I have no idea community organizing intern was even a job title, but it sounds like exactly what I want to do. How do you make a how did you make your way to that position? I've been doing a lot of online searching with very little success. So Sydney.
Yeah, sure. That's like a really great question, actually, because for me, it kind of was something that I just happened upon too. I think like a lot of students, I was just looking for an internship, and I, sent in my resume to 1DC, which is really great. If you're interested, you should definitely reach out to them. They're always looking for interns. But basically, yeah, I think I initially gotten introduced to them through one of my classes, actually, because we had an organization leader come and speak to us, and what they were talking about really spoke to me. So I kind of just looked them up on my free time and sent in my resume, and it ended up being like probably one of the most defining opportunities, I would say, that I've had in the last 4 years, which is like, I think a lot, like some of the most defining things, just like you're not expecting them. So I think, yeah, so I would say just go. I think the easiest way to like find the opportunities is to go through your school first and see what they offer, talk to professors. But yeah, that's how I got introduced to 1DC.
I'm sure, since it sounds like all of our panel members had very different travel routes to their current job. So maybe you'd like to chime in too, Karmen, or anybody else that has comments? Beeta, anybody? Okay, I'm going to throw in a question just to get, I see I've got a chat here. Yes, and by the way, Sydney, she was a senior. Okay, so is there a particular, for all of you, is there a particular extracurricular or a co-curricular thing that you did that kind of put you on this path? Sydney, you talked about an internship. Is there anything that you did during other times of the day that actually brought you to your current vocation?
I would say, I think a lot of the co-curriculars actually really started in my classes. I think the 3 like really great classes that I took pushed me out of my comfort zone, actually, and like pushed me into, we like to say, out of the foggy bubble. But I think, yeah, a lot of the projects that I worked on were like service-based, and I got to work with other students, and my professor really pushed us to go into other communities, talk to real people. I think like sociology is kind of a discipline where you like read a lot and you learn a lot, and you're like talking about all these things that are so important, and just like you want to fix so many things, but sometimes you forget that like, you're like, there's a world out there and you can go and talk to people. So I think one of the most important experiences and like co-creators that I've had is just getting out into the DC community and like talking to native Washingtonians and trying to get that perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else from our panel?
I can go. Gosh, and I was trying to remember what the name of the class was, and it's been a few years, so I can't. But I think when I went back and I changed my major and I went to sociology, I was really thought I was going to go into social work. I actually did an internship, which is what actually encouraged me to get out of social work So that's the opposite end of an internship experience, which is sometimes it's a really great, I think, insight into what the role would be. And it's what kind of showed me that while I really was passionate about it, wasn't what I wanted to do in my career. So I remember I'd taken a course, and I can't remember the name now, but it really was around inequality in the workplace. And it was very focused on corporate America, what that, essentially what that the years in history of inequality has looked like. I remember we watched a documentary about, I believe it was the Hormel factory workers. And it just got me thinking that, while I wanted to get out of marketing in the world that I was in, that there was a way for me to take this passion and apply it into a corporate setting that I actually was so used to. And so I think that's how it really, again, started with an elective where I realized it was a concentration I could go down, and ultimately realized while DEI was kind of a hard path to break into without that experience, that talent was a good way for me to get my foot in the door. So I really chose like a parallel path to ultimately, get me to a topic that I was mostly passionate about.
Thank you, Beeta. A question for Karmen. I'm a junior graduating in the fall of 2022, and I am an applied statistics major with social work and minors, primarily interested in working in policy research and survey. How did you find your current position? Let's see, I'm sorry. And do you have tips for finding, the opportunities essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started first, before I graduated, I started my job search like 3 months before I graduated because I was just so stressed about having something right when I graduated. And a big part of that was while I was taking all of my senior courses, I was constantly updating my LinkedIn and Handshake, which is like the college version of LinkedIn, with every single skill that I've ever learned in any of my classes. So like if I did one survey in a class 3 years ago, I put that under my skills. And I looked at other people's LinkedIns and saw how they wrote about their experiences. And you kind of market yourself into what you want to be. So like I didn't know what I wanted to be when I graduated. I was just applying to any kind of social research organizations, but I was able to harp on the survey skills that I had gotten in one class in my interview, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's great. We don't know of a lot of people who have that skill. So I think if you find 1 or 2 skills that aren't as common, like critical thinking and writing are really good skills, but skills that only you can have or only a few people can have, I think that's really important. Also, for stats, I would look at data analysts positions. I know personally that like my companies right now, we're hiring 4 data analysts right now. I literally had an interview earlier today for an analyst, and they are like very well sought out. So I think if you can kind of balance your quant skills in stats and stuff, and then also have a way to show that you do care about social policy, that's a great way to make you stand out to jobs and opportunities.
Thanks, Karmen. Theo, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I wanted to say it was nice hearing Sydney talk about her background because I feel like I'm coming from a similar place. I'm currently majoring in sociology and public policy. And while she was like interested in some of the stuff that was happening in Chinatown and DC, that was really interesting to hear about. But my question actually was for, I guess, Karmen. I'm looking at her bio for this event, and she said she had a concentration in inequality and social change. And my school, I go to University of Maryland, just started offering course clusters. So I wanted to ask how the concentration kind of boosted you and helped you more than just having the sociology major.
Definitely. I would say that Mason has a lot of concentrations for majors, and I think sociology has 4 different ones. And I kind of flip-flopped between concentrations. Like I started with deviance, crime, and social control, which is kind of like a criminology-esque concentration, but I couldn't get into one of the classes and I needed to get 4 of the credits before I graduated. So I picked another concentration that aligned with the things that I was interested in that I also could feasibly finish before I graduated. I think I didn't declare my concentration until the semester before I graduated. So it just so happened that all of the classes I had previously taken aligned with concentrations that already existed. So I think it's easier if you know what you're interested in and take classes in that as you're going along and look for things that kind of align with that, so you don't put yourself behind trying to jump into a new concentration. And I think that's a good way to, just like sociology is really broad, so to show internships and jobs that you're very dedicated or interested in a particular sector of sociology, I think that's a good way to do that. I hope I answered your question, but let me know if you have follow-ups.
Well, along with that question, thank you, Karmen. Is there a particular skill set that you think sociologists should work to promote about themselves as they're looking for jobs? That's for the panel members. Thoughts? Well, here's a question from one of our constituents. What's out there for sociology majors with a, let's see, just flipped out, with a childhood background, it looks like.
I think one of the nice things about sociology is it can be applied in so many different kind of realms. And so part of it depends on the type of job you want, right? Like, do you want to be community facing, interacting with people? Do you want to be doing a lot of writing? Do you want to be doing statistics, right? But regardless of, so like childhood and youth is maybe the area. So maybe you work for a nonprofit that focuses on like youth development, or maybe you work for a health group focusing on youth health, right? So I think there's a lot of different areas to go, but it's also important to think about like the day-to-day, like what are you interested in doing in that regard? And not being a like childhood and youth focused person, I can't really offer more beyond that, but I'm sure there are other folks out there who are more in that realm.
Did any of you, or did all of you, start your job searches with internships that were not paid or paid? Or no internship? Beeta?
Unpaid. I actually was going to say too, I don't know where the person who asked the question, oh, gosh, I'm going to mispronounce it. I think it's Mabinti. I don't know where you're located. I actually did an internship at Second Story, which was in Fairfax, which is it was like a halfway house for youth under 18, because that was originally where my focus was as well. And it was a really great internship. I actually took it off the list at the time from the recommendations from the GMU careers page. So I'm not sure if it's still on there, but it was a great internship. And like I said, for me, it ultimately helped me see that while I really wanted to volunteer and stay in that path, it wasn't where I wanted my full-time role. But it was an unpaid internship. It was really hands-on. You were working with the youth in the area. And it was just a really great experience for someone who's passionate about that field.
Karmen, did you do any kind of an internship?
Yeah, I tried to have an internship or co-curricular activity each semester so that I could beef my resume up. And I always just stumbled across them. I think all of them but 2 were unpaid. And I found all of the unpaid ones, like I said, on Handshake. I think it does a really good job of showing you things that you can actually apply for. Like LinkedIn does not have a good filter system for internships, in my opinion. So I think Handshake and keeping your Handshake up to date, and whenever you have free time to scroll, see what you're qualified for. And if you have the privilege of taking unpaid internships, I definitely would recommend that. I was not able to stay in Fairfax. I'm originally from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I wasn't able to stay in Fairfax over summer breaks if I didn't have a paid internship. So I worked really hard to find paid internships for the summertime. One of them that I want to plug everyone here to apply to is the Urban Institute. They have, I was an intern with the Justice Policy Center, which is like criminology adjacent, but they do have housing work there too, tax policy stuff, data stuff, like, and they pay very well, and you get to have like the DC experience as well. but it is very, very hard to find paid internships. And I think those come about with connections. So if you can connect with someone on LinkedIn, or if your school has career fairs, those are great places for you to make those connections and use them to be more attractive and increase your likelihood of getting those really difficult to come by positions.
Thank you. I think another question, how do you get into like a sociology position if that's really not your background? Is there a way that you can bridge your skills that still can make you attractive for something?
I can speak to this. I thought this question was going in the direction. There's one in the chat about how you break in terms of network, but I'll speak to both things. So I think in terms of network, that is a tough thing, right? If you didn't major it. I think when I started grad school, I felt a little bit intimidated because a lot of folks were coming from sociology programs. But part of the reason I went back to grad school is because I had stayed connected with my sociology professor from undergrad. She wasn't my advisor because I wasn't a major, right? But she was definitely a mentor. And then the postdoc that led to the current position I have, I also got through her. And so, or got connected to through her. And so I think even if it's just like one person who you felt attached to, or depending on like the culture of your school, of like how close faculty and students are, you know, I think reach out. I think professors love hearing from students, even if it's been, I took 2 years off after college, so it had even been a year, but it was really great kind of reconnecting. And then going from there, yeah, network is going to be super important. And then in terms of the skills piece, I think that another thing to think about is like what broader area you want to be in, right? Do you want to stay in academia? Do you want to work nonprofit? Do you want to work government, right? And sometimes having studied for a long time, right, 4 years in college, or, you know, 6+ years going through a PhD, that you get the impression that the only thing you can do is staying in academia, but a lot of the skills that you learn, it's really just like learning how to market them. And so like someone else was saying, you know, learning the stats stuff, that can be super, super important. And really applicable kind of across the board. Being able to write well, being able to be a good critical thinker, like these are all things that maybe it's easy to take for granted because you're maybe surrounded by people who have a lot of these, but kind of outside the academic bubble, these are super important. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. So for all the panelists, so what are some of the challenges that you faced, or do you think one does face when you major in sociology? Sydney, we haven't heard from you. Thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I think, at least personally for me, sociology and like social justice work is like something that is both like my passion, but also something that I'm choosing to pursue as a career. So I think that has like both pluses and negatives. I think the pluses are that, you know, it's my passion, but also it forces you to think sociologically all the time. And I think that can be at times really exhausting, and that can be, you can get burnt out so quickly. I mean, I'm a student, I haven't even entered the workforce technically yet. And I feel like I don't know, anyone who's like in the nonprofit sector, I really appreciate what they do, because I think, yeah, just majoring in sociology like comes with like some really heavy topics and like really heavy discussions. And I mean, I think it's really, personally, I wish that everyone took at least one sociology class before they graduated, because I think it really just shows you, like, it just opens your eyes to like something completely new. So yeah, I think definitely a struggle is that it can be overwhelming at times, but I think setting boundaries for that is really important, and finding spaces for like your own mental health in that space can be really helpful. Thank you, Sydney. Beeta, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can, but I was going to kind of pivot it to the other way, which is the way I view, and to Sydney's point, it is such an advantage, I think, to take sociological courses, whether it was like your major or it was an election that you took or elective that you took. It just kind of pushes you to think in a different way. It pushes you to think in a different way that the people you're working with, it puts things in such a different perspective that I agree. There are some challenges, and I felt some of that heaviness too, actually, in my last year majoring, because I took, I did the internship. I was doing social work, and it's really hard because you have to, you want to do good and you want to see yourself helping with change, but it also it does stick with you, right? I think by nature, this is something we're all really passionate about, so it's really hard to just like at the end of the day close the book on it and try to act like it wasn't something that was consuming you all day. But I think the pro of it and what gives sociology majors an advantage in the workforce and in world outside of just school is that regardless of what you're doing, again, whether you are like several of my peers on the panel today that are actually really doing something more research related and nonprofit, whether you're staying in that field or applying it to it in a different or corporate setting, it gives you such an advantage. And I think I've, even in my team at work, incorporated a ton of learning and development and trainings that are based around it, because I think all of my peers will be better off thinking in that way and forcing us to think a little bit outside of the individual and in all the ways our world and our environment impacts us. So it is heavy and can be really tough at times, but I think we have like almost like a superpower because we think in a really different way that gives us an advantage, I think, in so many different work environments and in schools. So the pro to some of the clear challenges to getting through a sociology degree or a master's.
Thank you, Beeta. Karmen, thoughts?
I want to echo what Beeta is saying, and Sydney. I think that is a pro and a con. I would also say while I was in school, I struggled a lot with justifying my degree in sociology, because before I was like, oh, I want to go into politics. I want to work at the State Department while I was a global affairs major. But then when I switched and had to tell my parents, hey, I'm doing sociology, one, they didn't know what that was. And then two, they were like, well, what are you going to do with it? And I was so like, I don't know, I'm just going to go with the flow and see where it takes me. And while I was over those 4 years, I kept Googling sociology careers and could not find anything, because there's not a sociology career. You apply, as everyone else has said, you apply the skills that we have into every career. And I think the hardest part for me was to stop like downplaying the social sciences and sociology degree over and over again, to the point where I just had to be like, okay, forget that I'm a sociology major. Think about like the things that I became while I was becoming a sociology major, like instead of attaching my name to a title that to me didn't yield any promising results, I looked at, okay, a lot of lawyers were sociology majors, like you can do anything that you want with it because it's so applicable. And I think the process of getting there and like understanding and calming down and being like, it's okay, I don't have to know what exactly it is that I want to do right now. That was the hardest part. But at the end of the day, I think it kind of gave me some freedom and not like being like, I have to do this. That's why I'm this major. And I would say that the hardest part is convincing yourself that you're on the right track. But I think that we're all on the right track. Look at us. We're here. I got a job. So if your parents are doubting you, tell them, hey, I went to a panel and all those people had jobs. So you can totally do great stuff with it.
That's great. Dr. Smith, any final thoughts or additions?
Just agreeing with everyone. Yeah, I think sociology gets a bad reputation sometimes in this sort of like world where STEM is kind of pushed over everything else. But yeah, it's so informative. And from a practical standpoint, right, you might have parents that say you can't major in it, then minor in it, right? Like you're a double major. There's ways that you can keep it in your life, even if it doesn't become your major.
Thank you. From Dr. Best, stay connected with your professors. It's probably something it's easy to dismiss, but they're the ones with the fingers on the pulse. So definitely remember them, and they're key resources and continue to be key resources. And I would certainly be in touch with your 4 panelists here. Make sure you have their contact information. Okay, how about what skills, you as panel members, what skills would you recommend that students master before they graduate? What's the most important skill that you actually possess as sociologists that you think people really need to make sure they know how to do this. Sydney?
Yeah, I think actually the first thing that comes to mind is kind of along what Carmen was saying earlier about kind of just like being confident in sociology and being confident. I think something that that took me to develop over time as a skill was like just basically speaking and like feeling like I am worthy of speaking and being knowledgeable and like, you know, talking about something that's really passionate to me. And like, I almost wish I basically wish I knew that like, you know, my freshman and sophomore year, because I think it really took me a while to develop that. And it really changes your learning experience, I would say, because just having informed conversations like with your peers and with your professors, and obviously I feel like that definitely translates into, you know, the real world or the, you know, career world, where you need to be able to just like take all your thoughts, like say them succinctly and like, you know, be able to just convey points, especially like even in non-academic settings. I feel like people who explain things the best are when, you know, they're easily explainable and you can easily understand them when they're not using really convoluted language. So I would say as a skill, just being confident and being able to just speak about things that matter to you.
Speaking to the people. Beeta, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say communication skills and like your ability to, and I think to me, communication, strength in communication is not just being able to talk and connect to people that you are working with, but listening, and like actively listening. I think too, it's amazing to me and my world now. I work with our leadership team. I work with executives who've been, you know, doing their respective fields for, you know, 30 plus years. And there's still like this development and room for improvement around communication that I think, again, as a sociologist, I think it's a skill that we can learn to develop, and just how to connect with different people is such a skill set to have that, you know, learning how to communicate, being comfortable asking questions, being super confident and knowing that that doesn't always mean having, you know, an answer or knowing the answer to everything, but being confident in what you know and asking questions when you don't know it. I'll say too, all I do in my role is interview people all day. And it's like the biggest thing and flaw I notice is people always feel like they have to have an answer for everything. You have to be 100% confident, and we're human and not anyone, you know, knows everything. So being really confident in what you know, speaking with that confidence, and also being really comfortable saying when you don't know it. And it's a sign, I think, of someone that knows where they have room for development, and it's just something that you know, helps you build relationships. So that communication, that awareness, I think, is the most important, and honestly built in, I think, in a lot of the academia you're learning as a sociology major.
Thank you, Beeta. Well said. Dr. Smith, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I love what you guys have both said. I think in terms of speaking to, right, we talked earlier about how sociology can be very emotional, it can be taxing. We're talking about really hard stuff sometimes. And that was definitely a skill I learned of like how to talk about something that I care a lot about or have, you know, big feelings about, but in a useful way and in a kind of concise way. The other thing I was going to say that sociology does is it, I think like your sociology courses and way of thinking helps kind of build empathy bridges, right, for people who might be different from you. And I think that that's definitely a skill that may be undervalued, but is definitely like valuable outside of just your sociology classes.
Great. We are now at the 10-minute mark. So for those of you who haven't asked that question that's been sitting, now is the moment to start really putting it out there. But before we move to another question, Karmen, do you have thoughts?
I was just gonna piggyback off of what everyone else is saying. And I also would say flexibility, because we have a lot of skills, a wide variety and a vast array of skills as sociology majors. So more than likely, the job that you get when you graduate, you're not going to feel like you're 100% qualified for, you know, like you're going to be like, I did a little bit of this, but I didn't know that it would get me this far. And I think being able to work within the skills that you have and being flexible with yourself, and also communicating, as Beeta said, like with the people that you work with or the people that you are in your internship with, I've done this in the past, but I would like to grow my skills, and learning to work within and beyond your skill set, and working with others around you. I really do feel like that's going to get you far by being willing to step outside of your comfort zone and try things that you have a little bit experience with, but you're not super confident. I think flexibility is a really good skill to work with, and that you can practice that in your classes as well by picking a topic for a paper that's something that you wouldn't necessarily write about. You know, I wrote about the same 3 things in all of my classes all 4 years, and sometimes I wish I had, like, you know, branched out and wrote about something that I wasn't as familiar with, so that I could say, yeah, I know a lot about this issue and I know a little bit about this issue as well, instead of getting that niche. I think having a niche is good, but also knowing a little bit of everything is also really good too.
Thank you, Karmen. Let's see. Sorry. I think another question is, what do you think is maybe your most competitive skill? I mean, what is the skill that you think really amps up your capabilities that you can speak to? I think what I've heard is a lot of it is around communication and your ability to step into, I guess, another person's shoes more easily, be in different environments, willing to get into different environments. Are there other particular skill sets that you would encourage our students to obtain? Sydney, thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think. I think for me, at least kind of going off of the last conversation too, about like getting involved in something that you don't really have much experience in, I think this isn't even really a skill. I feel like you just kind of have this in you if you like major in sociology, if you care about social issues. But I think it's really telling when you talk to someone and you're basically able to see like what they're passionate in with like the first couple minutes. And I think that's like really, I mean, I think that's like a really like, I think employers and like professors can really see that in someone. And even if they don't have the experience necessarily like on their resume, I think just showing and like speaking about something that's like really close to your heart and like something that you just like you can't stop thinking about, like it keeps you up at night. I think that's really important. And so I feel like even if you feel like you're not technically skilled in something, or you know you didn't get that internship in health policy that you wanted, but you still want to get into that, like I think just speaking about it is something that I think it really helps you in the long run.
So then how do you, with a sociology degree, okay, what's the big statement that you say at an interview? Why does sociology matter? Why is it that you're the one for this amazing job? What's your punchline in that question? Why does it matter? What's the gift that sociology gives you across these career fields? Beeta, what's your sales pitch? What's your sales pitch?
Tough question. I thought I'd have 30 seconds or so to think about it. Oh gosh, it's not, maybe
you seem quick on your feet, so.
I know, right? I have to be good at interviewing, so this is a great practice. So maybe not it's not cohesively put together, but I would say as a sociology student and my brain working that way, I think this probably the strongest asset that I have is empathy. I think sociologists, by nature have incredibly strong EQ, which is, I'm a little biased, but I'll argue is like probably the most amazing skill set that we have. EQ, being able to relate and communicate and work with so many different people from all walks of life, the ability to, I think, persevere past, I think everyone talked about all the challenges of breaking into the space. Again, as someone who's in talent and recruitment, I'll tell you, like, anytime I get a LinkedIn outreach or a note from someone where they are kind of pitching me why they'd be great for the job, even though on paper they don't look like they were the right fit, or it always stands out to me. So I think, and I think sociologists have that ability to be able to connect to people, whether they know them well or they're just getting to know them for the first time. So I would say that ability to build those connections, to have empathy, to communicate, to have confidence in a subject matter that we are all so passionate about. I think these are all things that, you know, any employer who would hire me would know, and I think would know in all of you that that passion is really hard to fake. And I think, again, that's what, you know, usually makes someone such a great asset to the team is really, you know, having that passion and being really, you know, all in on what they want to do. So whether it takes time to break into that space or not, once you're in there, chances are we're probably going to be some of the best employees out there.
I like that. You should have written that one down. Dr.
Yeah,
Smith,
I'll get the recording and I'll rewrite it.
Dr. Smith, from an analytics perspective, how do you sell yourself in a position as a sociologist? What's the benefit of that, of your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I work with sociologists, so it wasn't a hard sell, right? So, you know, stick together is always a good idea. It's going to depend on the job, right? I think the trick is going to like understand the job description, have your like set of skills and figure out how they go together. So like, you know, has already been talked about, you get a wide range of skills from sociology. To go off of what Karmen was saying too about flexibility, I think flexibility is like a huge asset to be able to have, so that when you find a job, once you're in a job and someone says, oh, I need someone to do this, it's really easy to kind of step into that place. So yeah, this is a hard question. I don't think there's like one right answer, but I think it's really just like we're like matching what you already have to what they're looking for. And because sociology is so broad in some ways, that's relatively easy to do.
That is what's so great about it. There's lots of ways you can make sense of your skills for a position. You just have to be maybe more imaginative in some areas. But what are your thoughts, Karmen?
Yeah, I was going to say what everyone else said, so I don't really have much to add, but to go back to what you said, what your punchline is when I was applying to jobs, I always put in my cover letters, as a Black woman, I care deeply about and think critically about social issues that affect, and then like would list whatever's in the job application, you know. So if it's a housing policy, I'm constantly thinking about housing and equity and all the things that are intertwined. And I harp on my understanding that all social systems are intertwined, you know, like that's like the basics of sociology 101. Like it's a social construct where everything's intertwined. And I like to show that I understand that deeply and can communicate that and bring that to a workspace. So basically the flexibility and communication, just to show jobs and peers that you have the ability to think critically and communicate those critical thoughts. Because as sociologists, we're used to talking to each other. So like if I say like race is a social construct, you guys are all gonna be like, yeah, totally, snaps to that. But if I say that to a marketing manager who maybe didn't have to take Soci 101, he might not understand that. So you have to be able to communicate why sociology matters so much, and specifically why it matters in that field. You know, like if you want to go into accounting, you can talk about wealth and economic inequality, you know, like there's always like sociology is in everything, and you have to be able to find that and speak to that so that everyone knows that, okay, yeah, maybe they don't have the skills that they need, but I think that they would be a fresh start or a fresh voice to add to our organization.
Very nicely put. Any final thoughts, Sydney, before we close out?
Not really. Again, as a student, I feel like I'm learning a lot too. So.
All right. Well, thank you to the panelists, Dr. Smith, Karmen, Sydney, and Beeta. It was very nice meeting all of you. Very interesting conversation. I hope all of you found it of value. I certainly did. And the next panel does start at 6 o'clock. So thank you all for joining, and good night.